Hello and welcome back to our channel. So, we recently went on a trip to Rome and spent 9 nights on the Odyssey of the Seas for a Greek Atlas sailing, and wanted to spend a little bit of time just doing a final trip review of that, since it was a pretty big undertaking for our family. At least it was our first big overseas trip with both of the kids, and the first time that we've traveled internationally with Raj. You can hear Remy did not like the fact that we were gone for that period of time at all. Remy said, "What? Big thumbs down for the boys. Our dogs missed us a lot. We missed them. It was pretty tough being gone from home for that long, but we had a fabulous trip. It was a fantastic trip. Sorry for all the gear on the table. We have our iPads out with some notes, so hopefully we'll be a little bit more organized for this one than we were for the Ovation review that we did. The first area that we want to talk about is travel. We did book our airfare through Air to Sea with Royal Caribbean when we booked our cruise, and that worked out mostly okay. I think one of the biggest issues that we ran into was not during the travel process from Boston to Rome, but on the return trip. We had an issue with checking in. And one of the issues that we found we had with that, booking through Air to Sea, is effectively nobody took accountability for our reservation. So on our final day in Rome, I ended up spending almost 6 hours on the phone and on various chat applications with Royal Caribbean, with Delta, who the booking was originally made through, even though the flight was operated by ITA Airways, and received no satisfaction from any of the three people that we were working with. The kids are already like with their thumbs down.
But this did the situation when we got to Logan, coming or going to Rome was certainly not problem free, and set us up to lower expectations and have to be a little bit less trusting of the process.
That is true. Yes, we did. And if you watch our ITA Airways video, which is in the Royals in Rome playlist, you will see some of our good, bad, and ugly part of the travel experience on the way from Boston to Rome. There were quite a few issues, especially related to the handling of special accommodations for Raj. Related to that, we're not going to go into details. You can watch the video for that, but there were definitely issues. But there were, some issues on the way back. The travel experience on the way back was fantastic. It was the complete opposite of our travel experience going from Boston to Rome. So Rome to Boston, the food choices, the drink choices, the crew on the plane with ITA, at the airport. Right. Chiara Rufino, again, like, the only reason I will ever consider flying with ITA Airways is that one employee that works there, because she made everything that morning that we arrived at the Rome airport, she made it right. So I cannot say thank you to her enough for that. But generally speaking, the airplane that we were on, we flew premium economy, so we paid $1,800 at the time of booking. I don't feel the experience was worth what we paid per person. So we do pay for all of our travel out of our own pockets. And so, to pay that amount of money and to board an airplane that has rip seats and non-functioning screens and is a little bit disappointing, especially at that amount. The footrest didn't work, but it was nice to have. Anyway. So I think for overall travel experience, we were all feeling like it was this, specifically with ITA Airways, it was not consistent. And I think that was the biggest issue that we had when we arrived in Rome. Our transport was reserved through Fiumicino Airport Shuttle service, and we ended up reserving all of our transportation for the duration of the trip. So that's airport to hotel, hotel to cruise port back to hotel, and hotel to airport through this particular service. They were very reasonably priced. We had private transportation booked through them, and I think that they showed up early for every single reservation. They were very personable.
When we met the first driver, confidence inspiring. really took a lot of the travel sort of nervousness in a brand new city right away. Even despite we had a little language issues, and of course I'm a low talker, so that just exacerbates that situation. But very comforting, very helpful.
We also conveniently had the same driver for I think a lot of our trips. I think there was one time where we had a separate driver, but that helped because you formed that relationship with him, and he was very nice.
Raj appreciated Fiumicino Airport Shuttle service. So if you are looking for transport, we will link to their information below in the description. We made our way into the center of Rome, to Hotel Trevi. That is where we stayed on the front end of our trip and the back end of our cruise trip. We thought the staff and accommodations were pretty good. We actually had different room types for each stay during the trip. We've booked a quadruple room, I think, for both parts of the trip, but didn't end up staying in a quadruple room for either parts of the trip because they ended up upgrading us at no additional cost. We were in a different room type for each segment of that stay. However, this is one of the few properties we found that actually had rooms that supported 4 people staying in one room. On the back end of our trip, the room they put us in, even though it accommodated 4 people, the bathroom situation was one which Rena will forever be horrified for the rest of her life. There was little to no privacy there. If you go to our playlists, you can see a tour that we did of both the first suite that we stayed in. It was a full 2-bedroom suite on the front part of our trip. And then our debarkation day video from the Odyssey, we also include a room tour of the quad suite that we stayed in on the back end of our trip. There. They did have at Hotel Trevi a great breakfast that was available every morning. Rena's like, yes, it was great. The wonderful thing about that is they had a lot of different offerings every single morning. Some of the rates include breakfast and other rates did not include breakfast. So just if you do happen to book there, just verify that whether your rate includes it or not. I think it was €10 per person.
If you plan on eating breakfast at all, I would say unless the delta is much more than 10 or 15, it's well worth it. It's a good way to get started in the morning, providing that you eat breakfast. It's just simple coffee. There's plenty of options for just coffee and a pastry or something like that in the neighborhood, easily and faster probably. But if you think you want a full breakfast and start the day off like that, definitely worth the included rate.
Rena did a little brief tour of the breakfast area, and I think it's included at the end of the suite tour video for Hotel Trevi. But the cafes that he mentioned, I think one thing to note, which we didn't realize when we arrived there, what Rena ran into at a couple of cafes.
Basically, you order at a separate cashier, and then you pay, and then you get this ticket. It's like going to the deli, and then you hand the person like your ticket, and then they serve you that way. But it's just very weird. It's not like your typical Starbucks where you walk in to the counter, you pay, and then you get the coffee at the same place. You have to go to like different stations, I would say. But once you understood what to do, it was very easy. But yeah, just trying to figure out what to do, where to go was kind of
And that's the other thing, as you pointed out, where we stayed, Hotel Trevi. It's right by the Trevi Fountain, very crowded, but there's a pharmacy right on the corner, so if you forget any essentials, there's a pharmacy right there. There's a ton of different cafes and food options, different shops, but the Trevi Fountain is right there. Everything that you would want to see is within pretty much a 10 to 15 minute walking distance. So the Spanish Steps, the Colosseum, the Pantheon, there's quite a bit to do, right there within that local area. The only thing that was kind of a questionable walking distance for us, we were told the Vatican was about a 20-minute walk. It ended up being more like a 40-minute walk from Hotel Trevi. Not that it's not doable, totally doable. I think had we realized that in advance, would have probably planned for that walk to happen earlier in the day when it was cooler at the time of year that we went.
And try to avoid the rain.
tried to avoid the humidity and also the rain.
It's a beautiful walk.
Yeah.
All kinds of great architecture when you're walking through Rome. So definitely don't. If you can walk that far and want to, certainly do it. But it's beautiful. But yeah.
And all relatively flat ground, so no incline. Yeah, definitely cobblestone. So just wear appropriate footwear, I guess.
One final note on Hotel Trevi. It is kind of spread out over multiple buildings, so I think there's like 6 or 7 buildings in that area. There's a lot of old, uneven cobblestone. And because the buildings are old, the rooms have been beautifully appointed, so they've been completely renovated. They're fairly modern, but not all the buildings have elevators, and the buildings that do have elevators still have steps to get in, so they're not all accessibility friendly. So if you do have mobility issues or accessibility needs, Hotel Trevi may not be the appropriate place for you to be staying. And then with the cobblestone, our bags, I was shocked. This like cheap luggage set that I ordered off of Amazon. I think the kids did an unboxing for it. There's a video. Showkoo luggage.
Yeah.
That luggage held up amazingly well. Just to see it going over that cobblestone, I was like worried wheels were going to break off, that there was going to be some type of damage to the bags, and there actually wasn't.
Ross, you're going to fall into a crack because they're pretty big. Need help getting out.
Definitely drew attention.
Yeah, but just be mindful that whatever luggage you take, we contemplated ordering like extra wheel kits, and just if we had to make repairs to luggage while we were over there, we weren't quite sure what to expect. But we did have to, the first half of our trip when we stayed there, we did have to carry our luggage up multiple flights of stairs. Thankfully, on the back end of our trip, the building that we stayed in actually had a tiny elevator, so we were able to put our luggage in the elevator and set it up and not have to haul it up the stairs, so that was nice. But just some of those things that we're not used to with older buildings. And I think you had the same thing with the showers, right? Like the plumbing systems.
Yeah.
And the other thing is, if you travel regularly or even not so regularly, and you're accustomed to staying in the Hiltons and the sort of the chain hotels and the different versions, the standardized experience is definitely not what you're going to get at Hotel Trevi. Very pleased with both of our stays and would recommend it very highly. And when we go back to Rome, probably will be our home base for future trips.
We highly recommend, if you have the ability to do it, to book at least a minimum of 3 days. I know, at least for us, the time change was a little bit rough with moving forward, 9 hours. So between that, the time change, and then just all of the different things to see and do in Rome, being able to break up kind of the sightseeing pieces was really helpful, especially with Raj in tow. Just, doing Rome in a day, I don't think was going to be very feasible for our family, at least. So if you want to get an idea of how we split up our days, you can go check that out in the Royals in Rome playlist. There are several videos that kind of show how we broke those particular sightseeing tours up. And just another note, Sal at Hotel Trevi actually made the arrangements for our tours for us because we did not pre-book before arriving in Rome. So that's something else that they will do for you at Hotel Trevi as well. So moving from Rome to boarding day, we ended up had reserved round-trip transportation through Fiumicino Airport Shuttle Service. We were picked up on boarding morning in front of our hotel and transported to Civitavecchia, to the cruise terminal, Rome cruise terminal over there. They say to plan for about a 90-minute drive. I think our drive took about an hour and 15 minutes. And that was on a Wednesday morning, and it went pretty smoothly.
Yeah, we didn't really encounter any traffic. There was 1 or 2 slowdowns, but I think that was construction based. But it was just sort of, kind of a little slowdown briefly, and then we were back to speed.
Yeah, the biggest issue that we encountered was that our driver didn't know which terminal to drop us off at for the Odyssey of the Seas. It's a huge port, it's not just for cruise ships. There's also cargo ships that are docked there. And so there's a little information station that he pulled off at, and he was able to find out from them exactly where the Odyssey was docked. We didn't find it in any of our cruise documentation either. So,
like the Rome airport, signage is definitely lacking. And when you get close to the terminal, you can see the Odyssey. It sticks out. And we had to drive around the parking lot twice because it took twice to figure out where the drop-offs were versus where the pickup area was, that sort of thing.
Yep, once he dropped us off at the terminal, we did have a 10:30, no, it was a 10 a.m. boarding time for that particular terminal. I think we arrived at 9:30, and they basically took our luggage. We walked straight in. We were staying in a junior suite, which also gives you priority boarding, but as soon as we entered the terminal, we went through security, headed straight up, and at this terminal they do something a little bit different. It's kind of like the deli counters here in the US, where they give you ticket numbers, and you basically have a seat. When they call your ticket number, your group proceeds to whatever desk happens to be open for boarding. We, pretty much from the time we entered the terminal to the time we set foot on the ship, it was 15 minutes from start to finish. It is hands down, and I think Rena said this in our boarding day video, the easiest embarkation process we have ever had.
But it was very, very smooth. Everyone was very friendly. It was really frictionless. Really frictionless.
Just agreeing with everybody else. It's just kind of weird because it just seemed like there was supposed to be more hassle than there actually was, especially going through security. Like, security was completely empty. Like, there was no one there. And I don't know. It just felt like,
especially coming off of the Seattle experience, I think that the contrast between the two was probably just...
It made me wonder if we were actually in the right spot.
It's like
sort of seeing the Odyssey out there.
It's like going to a mall and the mall is like completely deserted and you're expecting malls to always be crowded, so you just feel like you're not even supposed to be there, but everything's open. That's what it felt like going through like the process.
Raj, do you have something out there?
He was just giving multiple thumbs up to the terminal and the boarding process. It was really great. Yes, it was wonderful. So that's what Raj is doing. We did purchase the key. We don't purchase it for every sailing. We are with Royal Caribbean Diamond Plus, so we do get some benefits. It's always kind of a toss-up whether we're going to spend the extra money for the key. In this instance, it made sense just because we all wanted internet access for this particular sailing. And I think at the time we bought it, it was like $16.99 per person. So the per person internet cost, with the addition of the CHOPS embarkation day lunch, the debarkation morning breakfast, being able to drop off our luggage, our carry-on at least, as part of that, with, some of the other benefits that typically you get with the key, we were like, okay, well, for that we may as well do it. We did not end up using all of the services that came with the key. I think we did do the embarkation day lunch. We did the debarkation breakfast, and you can see that in the various videos that we have in the Odyssey playlist. We did the luggage drop-off during the check-in for the key. We did use the internet service. We did not use any of the dedicated activity times. What we found with the key is they only do that with some of the activities on board, and it's not all of the ones that the kids are necessarily interested in doing, and they're kind of at like weird times when we already have other things planned, like shore excursions or dinner or just something else happening that we're more interested in doing. We did not need to use the tendering for this because we did have an excursion book through Royal Caribbean for Santorini, but that was kind of a deciding factor in doing the key for us with this one. We weren't sure whether we were going to do a Royal Caribbean shore excursion or not, so the key would have given us priority tendering for that particular port. One benefit that we received, which we did not know about, it's not documented anywhere, but the first time I called for room service, Raj really loves the cheeseburgers through room service. He does not like the Windjammer cheeseburgers. He doesn't like the cheeseburgers anywhere else on the ship, not even at Playmakers, but he loves the room service, the Wagyu beef cheeseburgers. Wagyu.
Wagyu.
That's what he calls it. And so when I called for room service, after confirming our cabin number, they asked whether we had the key, asked us to confirm. I said yes, and they said, oh, so your service charges for room service are waived. And that was a bit of a surprise because from our understanding, they were only doing that during the pandemic when cruising kind of restarted, and they were not able to offer the lunch and breakfast experiences in the dining room. We haven't experienced it since then, so I don't know whether the Odyssey didn't get the memo or whether we just got super lucky. But for the rest of that entire sailing, we ended up receiving free room service as a benefit. Now, we did tip our service staff when they dropped off food for us, but we were never once charged the $7.95 delivery fee plus the gratuity. So that's just, something else. So for the Odyssey itself, we've said it before, we'll say it again, we love the Quantum class ships. I think that they are our favorite. On the sailing again, we once again had a junior suite J3 category cabin. For a family of 4, 1.5 bathrooms is fabulous when you have 2 toilets on especially a week plus sailing. We do have a room tour of our cabin. It is in the Odyssey of the Seas playlist that's on the channel. Do you guys have anything to add about the cabin?
No. 2 heads and 2 sinks, definitely the way to go. Even if you're traveling with 2 people, let alone 4 people.
I did have some trouble with the new controls because it's the new fancy technology forward controls, right? Getting the different settings. They're light-based, touch-based settings for day, evening, night.
The worst.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that took a little
Outside
getting accustomed
this
to.
The rest of the bathroom areas. This is
We also
lighting.
had to have maintenance come because our touchscreen wasn't working,
Didn't work at first.
so we couldn't get the shades.
I think the sliding glass door sensor need to be reset. Sometimes it gets loose, and basically the room steward just kind of slammed the door, and then that fixed it. So yeah, it's a new ship. Anyways, but it was a quick solution, and it was persistent. It was a persistent fix as well.
But the cabin was great. We were midship, which is typically where we land, just to reduce any potential issues with seasickness. As far as food, because we were in a junior suite, we were eligible to eat in Coastal Kitchen for dinner only. The full suites get to eat there for breakfast and lunch. Unfortunately, at the time that we booked this particular sailing, all of the full suites were sold out, so nothing became available, even though I kept checking. But for dinner, I enjoyed dinner there. I will say that we also had added on a 3-night dining package because this was going to be a 9-night sailing, just to try out Giovanni's Italian Kitchen, Wonderland, and teppanyaki on this particular ship. I know we've eaten at Giovanni's Italian Kitchen before on the Wonder of the Seas, and we've eaten at Wonderland before as well on a couple of different ships, and on Wonder.
Wonderland.
Oh, was that the
yeah?
one? Okay, I thought we ate
I'll be
there
honest
on
with you,
one of the
just
ones.
kind of on that piece on Wonderland. It's dark. It's narrow. The food was fine. The service was wonderful as usual. If you're on an Oasis ship, that Wonderland is literally 2 floors and substantial floors and all glass. It really spoils you.
They have a Mad Hatter.
yeah.
They do the whole thing.
Yeah, it's quite impressive and quite memorable. Food and service was wonderful as usual.
And then teppanyaki on the ship. It's a first for a Quantum class ship to have a hibachi style restaurant on the ship. That was on the 14th deck. It was beautiful. Glass windows everywhere. Raj's favorite. He's about to let you know how he feels about that because that's really just...
I'll give Dad's thumbs up, but I can't reach over there.
Yes. So that was his favorite. We did also eat at Playmakers for lunch. It is a paid menu in the Seaplex on the Odyssey, but the chicken tenders and fries is something that I can consistently get Raj to eat. So at $4 for 3 sizable chicken fingers with really good fries, I think is a pretty good value. As far as food, I think overall it was okay. It was a bit different than our experiences on other ships. We've been on 12 cruises since the restart in June of 2021, and I know they source from different locations depending on where they're sailing out of, so I don't know if that had something to do with it. I know there are also supply chain issues. It was just different. When I go on a ship, if I order a dish and it's on the menu across the fleet, I expect it to look the same and taste the same regardless, and that was not the case on this sailing, so I was a little bit taken aback by that. It's not to say it wasn't good, but it wasn't the same, and so that was a little different for me. I don't know what your thoughts were related to food.
I recognized it. It was not so concerning. If it was really bad or if it was really, really good over the others, then I think I would have put more thought into it. But it was what I expected. So, but it was definitely, it looked different. Some of the stuff tasted a little different, but it really kind of felt more like a source ingredients change rather than a skill in the kitchen, and the chefs and the people preparing. It felt like there was maybe some improvising that went on based off of the available ingredients.
One thing I totally appreciated this is our first European sailing ever, is that I could order a soda. So I do have some food intolerance issues because of some medication I'm on. And corn syrup, I react very, very badly to anything that contains corn syrup. I can tell within 5 minutes if I've ingested something that contains corn syrup. Anybody that's around me can tell within 5 minutes if I've ingested something that contains corn syrup. So I'm not usually able to drink soda in the US. And it was a treat to be able to be on this sailing and to be able to order a Coke or a Sprite and not have to think twice about it, because everything that was on board that particular sailing was made with real natural sugar and not corn syrup. So that was a nice treat for me personally. Raj, do you have anything to say about the ship? Yes, once again, Raj with a thumbs up, because it's a Quantum Plus class ship, and Raj really loves not just the Seaplex for the bumper cars in this one. We also had a Skypad on the ship, which is another one of Raj's favorites that he's tried out on other ships like the Mariner. And so that really contributed to his experience related to activities. The one negative for the ship for him is that he was not old enough to try out Zone Zero, which is the virtual reality experience. Unfortunately, you have to be 13, and he is 12, and so we were not able to give that a shot this particular trip. So I told him that once he's of age, we will book another cruise so he can try it out.
If you have any interest in dance club experience, music hall is always usually a winning choice, always consistently good. DJ David was very skilled, very, very skilled. And the groups of people that I met frequently and gained a few new friends, still keeping contact from Central California to Central Northern Mexico. It's really, really cool. A lot of dedicated folks that like to dance almost as much as I do.
Reed and I tried the silent disco for the first time. That was fun.
Yes, I enjoyed that quite a lot. It's a lot of people think it's very individualistic because you have your own set of headphones and you listen to whatever music you want to, depending on what station it is. But the majority of the people listen to the same station, and we all like sing the lyrics out loud, so everyone around us can hear what song we're singing. So it's very much of like a group activity, in my opinion. But yeah, it was really fun. It was our first time doing it, so yeah, I definitely will be doing that again.
Definitely an onboarding activity that karaoke sing.
Karaoke? Karaoke?
Yes, we watched the karaoke. We did not participate in the karaoke because our dogs walk out of the room when I start singing, so I was not going to subject the rest of the guests to that experience. Reen and I attended a lot of the activities on the ship. like the captain's corner. I think we felt like this was probably one of the best captain's corners we've ever been to. It was very, very interesting. Not only was the captain very, very personable, but they showed us video of how the engineering teams work, how the maintenance teams work, you know, how the bridge crews function. So kind of like a behind the scenes backstage tour of how all that stuff happens. You know, they did ask everyone that was in attendance not to video any of that, but it was really fascinating, I think, and that was pretty interesting. Moving on to ports and excursions. Second to Alaska, probably our most port-intensive sailing that we've ever done. And it was really, really exhausting to have port after port after port every single day. We ended up doing all of our shore excursions for the entire trip through Royal Caribbean, partly because we are risk averse and not willing to test if you don't make it back to the ship in time, it's going to take off without you. So that little extra bit of guarantee of having, you know, the excursion book through Royal Caribbean was really important to us. So in Naples, we did the Ruins of Pompeii excursion. We do have a video on that, and you know, we have friends that are considering this itinerary next year. So we tried to focus our shore excursion experiences on things that they should know before they go, if they're going to be booking these particular shore excursions, because with a lot of these things, you know, you never know what you're going to get from the experience, things that you could potentially be better prepared for, or if you are someone that is okay with booking through an independent shore excursion provider, you know, whether that decision could be made earlier in advance if you knew what the shore excursion experience might be through the cruise line, right? So that's where we kind of focused our attention, and the Pompeii excursion I thought was great. The only disappointing part for us was kind of the sail stop that was made. We were thinking that it would be made towards the end of our shore excursion. It was actually made at the very beginning and kind of delayed things by, 30-40 minutes. That stop to look at cameos and try to have people sell us cameos. Our bus was split into two tour groups once we arrived at Pompeii. One tour group was considerably larger than the other, so it was a group of 30 and a group of 15. We ended up in the group of 15. Our group got to go into the museum. The larger group did not, because they ran out of time. And, you know, I couldn't help but think that had they not had that sail stop at the beginning, everyone would have gotten to experience that. You heard the disappointment they felt, right? And to be sitting on a tour bus with people that were able to take photos inside the museum and to take videos, and to be all the way there and experience it through other people's pictures and videos when you paid all that money for a shore excursion. So that's just something to kind of think about, if that's something that you're interested in doing. By the time we got back to Naples, in town, we were all just really tired. Raj was especially tired, so we just kind of got back on ship. We didn't really explore the town. I wish that, you know, we had the energy to do that, but we did not. We'd love to go back there someday and explore some more. Is there anything else you wanted to add about Pompeii? I loved our tour guide. Barbara was, like, amazing.
Yeah.
She's on the video. You can hear, like, little clips of her, but...
She's a pit bull. She was stood up for us. We had a tour person and security detail all wrapped in one. She's wonderful. Very knowledgeable as well.
After Naples, we had a sea day before continuing on to Santorini. So in Santorini, we did the Santorini Selfie tour, again through Royal Caribbean Shore Excursions. And this one started out in ITA. It was a very, very hot and humid day. I don't know what I was expecting for weather. I was thinking it was going to be like cool, warm, but kind of cool and breezy at the same time. The weather was crazy hot and humid. There's no shade. It was relentless, and it was super, super crowded. I did not expect Santorini to be that crowded and that hot, and I think my expectations did not match up with the reality of the experience. And so I think that was a little bit disappointing for me personally. It was beautiful. Our tour guide, Lorenzo, was great. We didn't really, by the time we drove back into Fiera, I think it was so hot that we just spent a little bit of time down there walking around. And then we're like, okay, we're going to get in line for the cable car and head back to the ship. Be prepared to spend hours waiting in line to buy your tickets to take the cable car back down.
Thankfully, after you stay in the line, get the tickets, it's 5 or 10 minutes, and then you're on the cable car enjoying the view going down. Certainly, it was warm and humid. Definitely zaps energy and all. I was actually more, not disappointed, but I didn't quite expect the crowds. Like, as you see, I did most of the filming, and it's good that I'm 6'4", because I would have just got people's faces in most of the walking areas, and thankfully I can get above and actually see some stuff. But both were very crowded, and you know, it's a gorgeous place. It's certainly justified, but it does take away from it. It'd be nice to stagger those tours or something, so it wouldn't be quite such a line, 3, 4, 5 people wide going bi-directionally and trying not to bang into each other and navigate stairs and varying with stairs. Nothing really short, but
With
some
no
were more like
rampings.
platforms, and so you had to really pay attention, which you should for sure. But it was gorgeous. But I was just a little taken back by the sheer number of people that were clearly tourists.
As Nicole said, like, you want to spend time in the place and like kind of just walk about leisurely and not have to worry about anything, and trying to find your tour guide in the middle of like a large crowd was just frustrating enough, and didn't help that she kind of went ahead and didn't really wait for the rest of the groups. You were trying to like memorize people who were in your groups who had some type of guideline, but it was just, I felt like I was on an escalator. You can't really step off an escalator. You just need to go with the flow and continue moving. And that's what you need to do, because if you wanted to stop and take a picture, you'd lose your family, or like you get run over, literally. That's what happened to me a couple of times, and yeah, it was a great experience, and it was definitely like the number one place that I really have always wanted to go. But that did take away from it a little bit, but I guess that's what you can expect when you go to like pretty much the number one tourist place that everybody wants to see. And the weather just didn't help at all, because like you were literally touching everybody that you walked and by, and it was just super sweaty and not comfortable. But I mean, that wouldn't stop me from going back again. I feel like it was good that we did the tour, even though it was kind of just a picturesque tour. There wasn't really much information about it, but now that we've been on the island and we've seen what it's like, I feel like going back without any tour and just spending our day how we want to spend our day is going to be much more fun for us. But
one other thing I did was very welcome, and this has happened. It doesn't happen on all the ports, but Royal Caribbean had staff of their team members, crew with water, ice water, and while we were waiting, and we had a very short wait, a very short line, but it was very welcome. I think they were respectful of the fact that it was super humid and hot, and you could buy drinks and stuff, but that was a really nice welcome benefit that they offered all the Royal Caribbean cruisers. And we were in the shade too. But it was very nice.
Our next port stop was Mykonos, and for Mykonos we ended up booking a tour to Delos. So boarding a little boat to get over to Delos Island. We did a tour of the island. That was actually really great. I think we all enjoyed that actually quite a bit. It was really nice. Again, booked through Royal. After the Delos tour ended, we were dropped off back at the old port. We were able to explore that area, walk to the windmills. We got the experience of using the pay toilets. So this is something that we had not encountered before. So make sure that you carry coins, 1 or 2 euro coins, for using pay toilets in public, because that will be required. And not only that, I think, Reen, you have to keep your receipt to get out.
yeah, I don't know if this is for all the bathrooms, but you...
The one in Mykonos, anyway, down by the waterfront.
Right, I was going to throw my ticket away, but I just stuck it in my pocket, and then when I had to go out, I had to insert my ticket, in a little slot machine thing, stick it in there, and that's the only way I could get out. I mean, granted, if you don't have your ticket and you're panicking, you can't get out, just hop over the thing. I don't recommend this, but there's nobody standing there watching you doing it, so if you, for some reason, flush your thing down the toilet or throw it away or lose it anyway, you can still get out.
And if you're not quite as agile as the young people there actually was an attendant standing off to the side that you could have called over if needed. So he was on the men's room side of things, but I'm sure that they could have definitely, if you got in there, clearly paid, so I'm sure that they would have been able to help someone out. Next port stop was Athens. For Athens, we had a super long excursion plan. The highlights of Athens tour, it was 6.5 or 7 hours long, something like that. And it started off with a bus ride from Piraeus into Athens. That was about a 25-ish minute ride. And we went to the Acropolis, which was gorgeous, but again, super crowded and similar issues to Santorini, where there are a lot of stairs. It's very slippery. There are not railings everywhere, and so Rena slipped and fell on marble steps.
It wasn't rainy at all. It hadn't rained in
It was
days.
a bright, sunny, beautiful day.
It's just,
It's just scary because you're literally going up an incline and there's not really any railings, and when you're literally hanging off the side of a cliff, and if you fall, it's not the best. Luckily, I fell on a big open area, and I wasn't near the edge of something, but yeah, it didn't really feel that great.
But after that, drove back down into Athens and spent some time at the Plaka. What we found is that with this particular tour, when they tell you that they will leave people behind if you don't show up to your meeting spot on time, they actually will leave people behind. Believe it.
Yeah.
Don't think, oh, they're not gonna go away, they're not gonna leave me here. They will. They will.
And talk a little trash as we drive away. As just to put a little punctuation on, so we remember on future ones to hit the mark and don't be late unless you want to take a taxi back to the sport.
I left that in the video
Yeah.
for the Athens video where our tour guide's talking about, as you can see, we left 4 people behind. So that's, just another thing. Don't leave your belongings on the bus, just in case, because if you do get separated, you may not get your belongings back. The people that were left behind, they left a really nice pair of sunglasses, super expensive. Was it Maui Jim's, Ray-Bans, something? Sunglasses that cost at least a couple $100 behind on the bus. I thought the tour was great, right? We enjoyed the tour, didn't have any issues with the tour. The tour guide was trying to direct us to certain shops and to certain restaurants, and based on our experience in Santorini with Lorenzo, who just was very genuine and very open about, this is what you're going to encounter, this is where you should go. We believed all of our tour guides when they were making recommendations, right? And what we found with this one is we actually saw our tour guide kind of at the end after everything had been said and done. Accepting money from restaurant owners, where we've been kind of funneled. Our entire tour group had been funneled into this restaurant, and it was a little bit disconcerting because we're not used to seeing that. It's almost like they're getting kickbacks, right? And so after that, we were walking around the Plaka area and found that there were other restaurants that were even more crowded than the one that we'd gone to, that had a menu that was less expensive. The food looked just as good. And so feeling like we were maybe taken advantage of a little bit, just because we didn't know any better, right?
Well, I think there's also just a difference between, if I compare that tour guide to Lorenzo is not a native to Greece. He was from Italy, and he came here to work, and he is very, diverse. And so I feel like having that tourist perspective, trying to figure out your own way, and trying to figure out ways of not being taken advantage of in terms of finding good places to eat and that's affordable to you, and versus a native who is a tour guide. I'm not saying everybody who is a native tour guide is going to do this to you, but just in our experience, from what I've noticed, Like, it's just two different perspectives, so I feel like us being tourists and having spoken to Lorenzo, who also was a tourist and understands where we're coming from in terms of, like, being real with us in terms of prices and sneaky people who might not have the best interests for you guys is, I don't know, it's just making that comparison is what I've noticed.
In Athens, you know, if you choose not to take the tour bus back, we put this in the video tour, the video as well related to this tour. You can actually stay longer if you want. You just have to ask if you're going to take a taxi back to port. Keep in mind that it can take up to 30 minutes to get back to port from Athens. But you also have to ask the taxi driver to turn on the meter. If you do not ask the taxi driver to turn on the meter, then it could be a very costly taxi ride back to port. If you ask the taxi driver to turn the meter on, it is about a €20 ride from Athens to Piraeus, where the port is.
And that was in early October 2022.
Correct.
Just for a little perspective on that.
Okay, moving on to, I think, everyone's favorite, Kusadasi, Turkey. So we did the Ephesus, Diadem, and Miletus tour with lunch in Turkey, and I think, hands down, it was all of our favorites.
Yes.
I thought the pacing was amazing. Not only were the ruins just great, the pacing of it was really nice. Our tour guide was super personable, very, very knowledgeable. I'm kind of sad that our audio didn't work as well as we hoped that it would have, because she gave us permission to record everything that she was saying during the tour. But it was, I think, the most enjoyable. It was a very long tour. It was almost 8 hours. But I think, you know, we ended up doing 2 videos for this day just because it was so long and there was so much involved. But it was just beautiful. We did the least amount of research into this port stop because it was not a primary area of interest for any of us. I think we were all kind of fixated on Rome and Greece, and it was just kind of like, okay, what are we going to do in Turkey? Well, let's just do this short excursion because that seems like it'll cover kind of the important stuff, right? And left it at that. And favorite excursion. Yes. Favorite, I think, port stop for me personally. It was beautiful. The climate, it was very temperate. It was very mild. It was warm, but it was what I was expecting Greece to feel like a little bit, right? Warm, but very breezy and cool. Beautiful beaches. If you do not want to do an excursion to ruins or anything like that, Turkey, if you want a beach day, Turkey is the place that I would try to plan a beach day, because the beaches that we drove by, and we have some of them in the videos, they were beautiful to drive by.
The diverse landscape was just really the winner for me. The ruins was fascinating. The tour guide really made it. I'll be honest with you. I would very much like to try to track her down for a future trip and see about doing a private tour, I think, because it would be even more comprehensive in that, if that's possible. She was really a winner. The vistas, the landscape, it just, I didn't have a lot of thoughts before, or expectations, which probably is always a better way to travel. But this one I just didn't have any, and I didn't do much research, so everything was just a pleasant surprise, and really definitely a place I would love to go back and explore. The city, it's very modern. The city, from what we saw from the tour bus, I realized that that's not the whole story, but that's part of traveling, right? It's your first impressions, and the feelings that you get from those first impressions go pretty far until you're dissuaded otherwise, which I don't think I would be. But yeah, it was beautiful.
Raj would like to see something.
My favorite part of the Kusadasi excursion was the last part.
Lunch?
Second last part? I don't remember.
Carpet demonstration?
Yeah.
Oh, the carpet demonstration.
Yes.
What did you enjoy about the carpet demonstration? I'll just say that the carpet demonstration that we were all dreading at the beginning of the week because of the Cameo sales stop. We were expecting like a hardcore like timeshare sales type of like sales pitch. We were not going to be allowed to leave without buying a carpet. That's not at all what we encountered. It was
my favorite excursion because this is what I love about traveling to foreign countries in the first place is the people. It was the excursion where like I loved connecting with the women who created the carpets in the first place and just the backstory and learning about the process that they go through, and it was just incredible to see. And we were leaving the demonstration and a woman was sitting on the sidewalk like weaving, and I looked over and I just commented like that's beautiful, and she grabbed my wrist, which is kind of like a little alarming at first, but she was very sweet. She pulled me over, sat me on her bench, and she didn't speak very English at all, but it was just like I was like crying because it was just like such a nice experience to have with her. But she took a string and like tied it around my wrist and gave one to Raj as well of like the carpet thread that she was using to weave into the carpet. And yeah, it was just a really special moment to have with her, and she was very grateful that even someone would take the time to look at what she was doing, which is like also really sad to even think about that most of these women put so much effort into the carpets and not everybody knows the backstory that is behind that. So yeah, I don't know, it just made me think of like to just take a step back and understand the process that goes into some things, because you might not, there's always a deeper story to what is on the outside of things. And so I don't know, it's just like it was a great excursion and a great opportunity to have. So even though like the carpet demonstration, yes, is a sales pitch in a way, but it's a lot more than that, and they show that. So yeah.
Anything else, Reggie?
No.
You missed out on KFC in Turkey. There is a KFC at port, and Raj missed out on it. So, you know, next time. So Crete was our final port stop of this trip, and I think the island was beautiful. We ended up booking the Old Town walking tour in Chania. I would not book this tour again. It was not what we thought it was going to be. The panoramic photo stop was beautiful, but given what we spent on this excursion, I feel like, and we say this in the video that we did for Crete, we could have done this very easily on our own for the $6 round-trip shuttle bus ticket that Royal Caribbean was selling on board that day. It felt very rushed. The tour guide was very personable, she was very knowledgeable, but it was like she kept watching the clock, right? She was very fixated and focused on the times where we had to be, when we had to be there. Even people asking to use the restroom had her stressed out because we had to be meeting the bus driver by a particular time. And so that was a little disappointing to not be able to spend any time there. Like, we didn't even get to go into a souvenir shop because it was just like, we know we need to meet the bus driver, you know, at 11:30 to get back to the port. And so we didn't even get to go into a store to buy a souvenir from our time in Crete. So that was, like I said, that was disappointing to me. I think the kids would have been happier doing Heraklion, an excursion there, maybe looking at some ruins, something that had more of kind of a backstory or history behind it, versus just kind of walking around the Old Town area. I think overall our experiences were pretty positive with all the shore excursions that we did, you know, with the exception of the one in Crete. As far as final thoughts go, that port intensive nature of this cruise is it's the first time that we've really encountered that, where we've really had back-to-back days of very, very long shore excursions where it's 6+ hours every single day of doing that, and it's not anything that we're used to. So that was exhausting, at least for me.
I would say the physical part was less exhausting. The heat zap power serves energy and all. But for me, it was just a sheer overwhelming amount of input in terms of the ruins and the vistas, and all good, but at some point it just takes a lot to process, and it does, cognitively, it drains you. And that's what I found. I could see how a back-to-back version of this, or skip a day and kind of digest what you just took in the day before, moving on, what I think could be a little bit more beneficial pace if schedules and such permit such luxuries.
Mm-hmm. I think one of the other things, and we mentioned this in a couple of the shore excursion videos, is because the heat, I do have some medical issues, and I have a lot of difficulty regulating my body temperature, and so we did pack some of the disposable ice packs to bring with us. And oddly enough, I didn't end up having to use them, for myself, but we did end up being able to help somebody else out on one of our shore excursions. You are looking at things to pack, that may be something that you consider bringing with you, is just a disposable ice pack, or seeing if you stay in Rome beforehand. I found that pharmacies in both Rome and the places we went in Greece were pretty inexpensive and reasonably priced. Like the Thermacare heat wraps that Rena uses here in the US, we'll end up buying a 3-pack for $25. Over there, a 3-pack was the equivalent of $10 US. So very reasonably priced over there for pharmacy items. So if you do happen to forget something, I wouldn't hesitate to go in and make the purchase. We found most everywhere we went, everybody spoke, pretty much everybody spoke English everywhere we went. Some of the other considerations for this trip, self-unplanned. So we're trying to figure out what to do for data services. My mom is elderly. She was being left behind. We needed to make sure that we could stay in touch with her. We have AT&T as a cell service provider, and one of the options was doing international day pass through AT&T. Another option we considered was the eSIM conversion. We did try to do the eSIM conversion. Airalo, and I will link to them in the description below. It looked pretty simple enough to use, and it was easy to get set up. I bought, a very simple data plan. It was like $20 or something like that for 30 days of use. And it said it would activate it once we landed and were able to attach to a Wi-Fi network there doing that. What we didn't realize is that you have to have a phone in the US that's unlocked. So that's on us to not know that. So that $20 was kind of wasted doing that. But if you do have a phone that happens to be unlocked, then that may be an inexpensive option for you. Another reason why we were looking at that eSIM option is because we're going to be doing some other trips overseas. We're going to be doing, Australia and Norwegian fjords in the upcoming year. And so if that worked out well for us on this trip, we were contemplating using it for some of those other trips. So was the reason we were looking at that. But the AT&T International Day Pass, we confirmed we were able to use it. I think it was $10 per day for the first device, and then $5 per day for any additional devices.
On a shared family plan.
On the shared family plan that we have. So that was, not as expensive as it could have been, and I believe they capped the cost at a certain point. The one thing that we heard from Verizon cell phone plan users is that they were charged not only on a daily basis for their international plan, but they were also being charged additional fees for data on top of that. So that's just something that, depending on who your provider is, for you to research and make sure that you understand exactly what those charges might be if you go overseas, because that could become expensive pretty quickly depending on how you use your devices and what type of data services you utilize.
But I will say, I was very impressed actually. Most of the ports that when we got off the ship, and we used the AT&T International Database, I was pretty impressed on the speed of service. It felt is better in some places than we do here in rural where we live.
And we also used it a lot for getting around. We use it for Google Maps,
Yeah,
right?
Google Maps,
Walking.
yeah, Waze as well.
To get around, figure out how to walk around the places, especially when we were in Rome.
Yeah.
One other thing that we had to take care of before leaving was obviously making sure that we had some euros on hand for traveling. And where we live, we weren't sure whether we would be able to do that easily, so we ended up going to our local bank about a month before our trip, and they were able to order. They actually kept our order on file until they felt like the exchange rate was good to our benefit before they actually placed the order for us. So I think at the time we ended up exchanging about 500 US dollars for euros, and I think we ended up with 470 euros for 500 US dollars, something along those lines. We ended up using our card that waives foreign transaction fees for pretty much everything overseas wherever we could, and try to limit our use of cash transactions whenever possible. Check with your bank and see if there is a lead time that's required for you to actually order the cash. I'm sure you can exchange money at the airport. We could have done that at Logan if we needed to. I just prefer to do it through our local bank because I know them, I trust them, and I know they're going to do what's in our best interests there. So that's, something to keep in mind. Another thing that I thought was interesting is that while we were in Italy, there was no tipping expected. So tipping culture in the U.S. has gotten a little bit crazy. I have lots of friends that work in the service industry. We don't have any issues with tipping, whenever and wherever necessary. It was very, very surreal to us to, when you go to sign a credit card slip at a restaurant in Rome, there's no tip line because there is no expectation of a tip. If you choose to provide a tip, you do so in cash, and they are over the moon. I mean, even if you hand them €2, they're so
Actually, the
thrilled
first place,
with
I almost felt like they were insulted. It was very it took me back quite a bit.
Yeah, well,
But I mean, generally, we found a couple of places that we visited every night. Actually, the restaurant we fell in love
Trevi,
with, and
it's right near Hotel.
and that was our first night. They were like, "What are you talking about?" Because the other thing is on the sit-down restaurants to some extent, there's usually sort of a communal tip jar that everybody participates in. You kind of figure if you get above and beyond service, you can hand it to somebody, but it almost feels like that they would prefer to go into the communal tip, which again, that's completely foreign to us, literally. And
I think just in some cultures, I'm not saying like the culture in Rome was like this, but some cultures viewed tips as like charity. So like if you're tipping someone, it could be taken like, oh, like we pity you, like we're making you feel like you need this versus like thank you. So I think coming from Americans as well, it's a very different thing. But I'm not saying that it's like this everywhere, but it's just also doing your research on also what amount you should be tipping, because here like the general amount is like tip 20%, but in other places it might be different. So because I feel like we had to do that when we were sitting at one restaurant, we didn't really know.
It says to round up to the nearest euro for your bill is the appropriate amount to tip.
So it can
in
be
some places,
different.
so it varies. The other thing at the restaurants is they don't serve you water by default, and you will notice while there is no tip that is expected, there is a service charge that is added on by default, and maybe this kind of takes the place of the tip, but it was like $3 or something. I mean, it was ridiculously low, right? But that covers any bread and water that is delivered to your table, and so they will ask you at the start of your meal, would you like bread and water? And if you say yes, then the service charge is added for those components to your bill. So that was something that was new and different for us, at least, to have experienced. By contrast, or actually, like the tours in Italy as well, like the tour guides did not accept tips when we were there, and so that was different. By contrast, in Greece, tipping was very much expected, right? And at rates that were comparable to what we experienced in the U.S. both at the restaurants and by the tour guides. And so there were a lot of announcements at the end of the tours about, show your appreciation and all of this. When we ordered anything at restaurants while in Greece, there was a line item to add a tip on credit card receipts, and tip jars out in full force in front of the counter for dropping tip money in. And in Turkey, what we encountered was it's not standard, but it's appreciated. So you're not expected to tip, but if you do, it's not considered an insult by any stretch of the imagination, but it is, they do express appreciation for that. So just be mindful when you're going to these different countries that the tipping culture is quite different than what we're used to in the U.S., and that it will vary from country to country depending on where you're visiting. So that was different for us, and we were kind of like scrambling on our phones. Thank goodness we paid for international day pass, because we're sitting at restaurants like, oh, what do we do? Like, do we tip? Do we not tip? It was different. And then the other thing that we were warned about before we went, when we called Delta to make arrangements for Raj for a land meal and pre-boarding and some other things, their assistive services actually warned us about some scams related to being in Rome, traveling with someone that might not pick up on cues and nuances quite as easily. And so just being mindful of, if you find money on the ground in any denomination, just walk by it. Our first instinct is to pick it up. Don't even try, because the next thing you know, there's going to be police involved, and there's different types of police around every corner. I mean, you will not, it doesn't matter where you go. There's 3 or 4 different types of.
Right. Rome, there was the capital, which was right around the corner. There was city. There was what I would guess a state or county, and then there was the federal police. Yeah. And they were all, who knows what jurisdiction, who had access to what, because they were all in cars, in uniforms. It was very interesting. But yes, and one of the scams there that, and you're probably going to talk about, and this is very interesting. Yeah, don't step on any papers or any sort of artwork, because that's that's hard sometimes for Raj to be mindful of, especially being overwhelmed. Actually, anybody really.
What were the people who were standing like they were trying to sell? What are they called? They're trying to sell you stuff. Like the little selfie
yes,
sticks.
the lights. Don't touch anything.
Yeah. Also, just try to keep your distance when you're walking, because they will come to you and shove things in your face. We got a couple take a rose or whatever.
Yeah, as soon as you touch it,
right. We've heard stories they'll try to slip stuff into your pocket and then say you took it from them. So just to avoid that, just be polite about it, but just polite.
Yeah. And the one that's sort of the most evil, in my opinion, is it really plays on people trying to be helpful, which sometimes Americans are, sometimes not. It is not just Americans, but the whole intentionally dropping money, and you say, "Oh, sir, you dropped your wallet, or you dropped this," and then that is actually the point where the scam starts. You've been had. They call it police over. You returned it with less money than there was in. Just a whole iteration. So really taking advantage of someone's good nature and being polite. In this case, unfortunately, does not pay off, and it's hard. Like I said, it really kind of feels evil.
It's just our nature.
But apparently, it's pretty effective, especially in that area. So, and not everybody criminals, obviously, but there's always an element of percentage, and it's a big city. So, and there's a lot of tourists traveling from all over the world. Because it is a wonderful destination to check out. So
that's the most nervous situation we thought Raj would get, because he's the type of person he's very
here's this.
Perceptive about that stuff. When he notices something that's fallen out of somebody's pocket, he's very quick to say, "Hey, sir, ma'am, you dropped this." But all of us are like that. But Raj specifically notices that stuff, so we are worried about that. But he was mainly just trying to avoid walking into people because it's very crowded. So.
The one thing that I, in talking to folks that actually visit Europe a lot, and that are either police officers or in the security world, one of the things that I gleaned from most conversations was really to keep your head on a swivel and means, meaning that you're looking around constantly. Obviously, those roads are hard, so you got to look up and not trip. But just being aware of your surroundings, and what I found was eyeballing as many people as you can. That feels like a really good way of deterring someone from approaching, because you're less easy target if you're constantly vigilant and paying attention to stuff.
We were lucky because we had a lot of resources that we could rely on. Like, I have a very good friend of mine who is European, and he was explaining. Oh my God! Yes, Remy is a lapdog.
He's our lapdog.
Even though he weighs like 110 pounds, which is normal for his breed and his size, but he doesn't realize that.
He's also too big to be a lapdog
Anyway,
for any of us except the dad.
Rafa was a great resource to reach out to learn more about European culture. For example, in Rome, he said it can be seen as disrespectful to eat pizza with a fork and a knife. Always eat it with your hands, so it's very helpful, even though we don't normally do that, but some people do. So that's just one example. He also gave tips on how to approach how to approach or avoid pickpocketers. No.
Oh my God, Remy, this is not helpful. I'm trying to talk.
Pocket thieves and all of that, so. That's all I have to say.
So our boys missed us. This was our longest trip since Alaska. It was about 2.5 weeks. It's the longest we've ever been away from home, and we missed these guys. They missed us. It was a super long stretch for our dog sitters.
He would prefer if he went with us, or
Yes.
vice versa.
There were some tensions between the two dogs. Remy is a puppy still. He was not quite a year old
Even though he looks like he's not. But he is.
when we went, but and Theo was 11, and so there was a little bit of
I don't think you can cross to mom from there, Ram. I don't think you can cross to mom from there.
it's kind of needy. But that was kind of the hardest part about being away from home. I think we all enjoyed the trip overall. It was amazing. Beautiful places that we went and visited. The cruise was fantastic. I think we would all love to be able to go back someday. But the hardest part really was leaving these guys behind and being away from them from so long. Did you prefer this one or Alaska?
This trip, though it is very close, is a major factor of it being close is because rent. Is because of it's because of the exhausting shore excursions.
Oh, yes, that is true.
I got you, Bob.
Ram,
Okay.
really? Really, Ram?
Remy!
Sure, I think you weren't looking at me, but you...
Rainy, final thoughts on the trip?
I obviously liked him a lot. This was my graduation present, so I'm very thankful that this was my gift, and yeah, definitely. Not after you just drank water,
Yeah.
really. Ew!
Saw that coming.
So, yes, overall, great. This is really just not a horrible habit you have here.
Okay.
He's trying to get to mom from over there.
Clearly, we have some more training to do.
You trying to get to
Hello,
Mama over
Remy,
there.
my love. What are you doing? I know. Okay, I know. All right.
You see the tail?
Dad, final thoughts?
I missed my boys a lot. Rena's going to be an attraction here soon to manhandle Remy. It was a very good trip. It was a great trip. Like I said, really love to see those sights, things you just never get to see when you're in the U.S. The length of history that are represented in those rooms just don't compare to things you can see in the U.S. generally. So, just that opportunity experience, very grateful and thankful that we're able to check it out, despite our first world problem concerns about, having too much input, certainly in the scale of things. it is one of those wonderful trips. Hope to get back and hope to get back to some specific areas. But there's a lot of the world that we already are booked to see in the near future. So, but hopefully years of travel to continue. Thank you.
Thanks for watching. Until next time. Bye.
Bye.